Student Dex Flamewing thought he understood the concept of mercy in warfare. His species, the Draconian Collective, had developed elaborate codes of honor that emphasized compassion toward defeated enemies as the ultimate demonstration of civilized behavior. When he enrolled in the Stellar Academy's Advanced Military Ethics course, he expected to refine his philosophical understanding of mercy through rigorous academic debate. What he didn't expect was to have his entire worldview demolished by a quiet human female who spent most of her time knitting in the back row. Dr. Joy Bright had introduced herself as a human military historian, conducting comparative research. She wore simple civilian clothing, carried what appeared to be craft supplies, and seemed more interested in her needlework than the sophisticated ethical discussions taking place around her. For 6 weeks, she remained silent during debates, occasionally looking up from her knitting to make notes on a worn datapad. The explosion happened during Professor Tex Lightfall's lecture on Mercy as Strategic Principle in Modern Warfare. Today, Lightfall announced to his diverse class of 41 species, we examine the role of compassion in military conflicts. Student Flamewing, please present your analysis of mercy as both moral imperative and tactical consideration. Dex activated his philosophical processing systems, drawing upon centuries of draconian military tradition. Professor, mercy represents the pinnacle of civilized warfare. The ability to show compassion to defeated enemies demonstrates superior moral development and strengthens post-conflict relationships. Excellent analysis, Lightfall replied. Student Vex Storm C, what's your perspective? The aquatic representative's gills fluttered with intellectual excitement. Professor, I would argue that mercy serves multiple strategic functions. It reduces enemy desperation, encourages surrender rather than suicidal resistance, and establishes favorable conditions for lasting peace agreements. Very thoughtful, Student Pex Goldfall. Mercy, declared the crystalline being, their translucent form refracting the classroom's lighting into rainbow patterns, is fundamentally about preserving dignity while minimizing suffering. Advanced civilizations demonstrate their sophistication through restrained use of force. The discussion continued in the same vein for 45 minutes. Students from dozens of different philosophical traditions explored the theoretical frameworks governing compassionate warfare, debating utilitarian calculations versus deontological imperatives, analyzing historical precedents, and constructing elaborate moral arguments about the proper treatment of enemy combatants. Throughout the entire debate, Dr. Bright continued knitting what appeared to be a sweater, occasionally glancing up with mild interest, but never participating. Excellent discussion, Professor Lightfall concluded as the debate wound down. You've demonstrated sophisticated understanding of how mercy functions as both ethical principle and strategic tool in civilized warfare. That's when Dr. Bright set down her knitting needles and spoke for the first time in 6 weeks. Professor Lightfall, she said, her voice carrying a casual quality that somehow made Dex's survival instincts activate. May I ask the class a question? Of course, Dr. Bright. She stood and walked to the front of the classroom with movements that suggested violence was always an available option, despite her grandmotherly appearance. Students, your discussion has been fascinating from an academic perspective. But I'm curious about something. Dex noticed that several classmates had unconsciously shifted to more defensive postures as the human approached the speaking area. You've spent the last hour debating the theoretical applications of mercy in warfare. But I haven't heard anyone actually define what mercy means. The silence that followed was uncomfortable and complete. Student Flamewing, she continued, you mentioned that mercy demonstrates moral superiority. But what, specifically, constitutes merciful behavior? Dex felt his cognitive system struggling with what seemed like a simple question. Dr. Bright, mercy involves treating defeated enemies with compassion and dignity, rather than seeking revenge or inflicting unnecessary suffering. Interesting. And Student Stormsea, you suggested that mercy encourages surrender. What actions would you classify as merciful treatment of prisoners? The aquatic being's gills fluttered nervously. Dr. Bright, merciful treatment would include providing adequate food, medical care, protection from abuse, and eventual repatriation. Adequate food and medical care, Dr. Bright repeated thoughtfully. Student Goldfall, in your definition, how long should merciful treatment continue? Until the conclusion of hostilities and appropriate prisoner exchange or release, the crystalline student replied with apparent confidence. I see. So mercy, in your collective understanding, involves treating defeated enemies humanely for the duration of their captivity. The students nodded, pleased with their philosophical analysis. That's interesting, Dr. Bright said, and something in her tone made Dex's defensive systems generate warning signals. Because by that definition, humans have never shown mercy in warfare. The classroom erupted in various forms of alien confusion as students processed this seemingly impossible statement. Dr. Bright, Professor Lightfall managed, surely you're not suggesting that humans lack compassion for defeated enemies? Professor, I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating a fact. Humans have never, in recorded history, shown mercy as this class has defined it. She activated a holographic projector, and suddenly the classroom was filled with what appeared to be historical documentation from human military conflicts. The problem, she continued, is that your definition of mercy assumes temporary defeat, followed by eventual return to previous status. Human warfare doesn't operate that way. The holographic displays showed detailed records of human conflicts spanning millennia, from ancient Earth battles to recent interstellar campaigns. For example, during the Centauri liberation, human forces captured approximately 40,000 Carillion occupation troops. According to your definition, merciful treatment would involve providing adequate care until the conflict's conclusion, and then releasing them to resume their previous activities. That seems reasonable, Student Goldfall said cautiously. It would be reasonable, Dr. Bright agreed, if humans considered warfare to be a temporary disagreement between otherwise legitimate political entities. But humans don't view warfare that way. She modified the holographic display, showing detailed records of prisoner processing during the Centauri campaign. Instead of temporary detention, captured Carillion troops were enrolled in what humans call comprehensive rehabilitation programs. These programs included education about the legal and ethical problems with occupation warfare, counseling about trauma responses, job training for peaceful occupations, and gradual integration into human-protected colonial society. Dex felt his philosophical frameworks generating error messages. Dr. Bright, that sounds remarkably humane. Student Flamewing, it is humane. It's also permanent. Of the 40,000 captured Carillion troops, 37,000 eventually chose to remain in human space as productive members of colonial society. They were never returned to their original military units. The implications hung in the air like toxic gas. Dr. Bright, Student Stormsea asked, his gills fluttering with growing agitation. Are you suggesting that humans don't release prisoners of war? Student Stormsea, I'm suggesting that humans don't believe in prisoners of war. We believe in prisoners of stupidity who require educational intervention. She gestured to additional historical records floating around the classroom. Humans operate under the assumption that anyone who chooses warfare as a problem-solving method has demonstrated poor decision-making skills that require correction. We don't temporarily detain enemy combatants. We permanently reform them. Professor Lightfall's academic composure was beginning to crack. Dr. Bright, what you're describing sounds like systematic brainwashing. Professor, what I'm describing is systematic education. The difference is that our students voluntarily choose to abandon their previous career paths after understanding the practical and ethical problems with violence as conflict resolution. She modified the display again, showing psychological evaluation reports and rehabilitation success rates. For instance, during the Andromedan police action, human forces captured the entire leadership structure of the syndicate pirates. Traditional mercy would involve providing adequate care and eventual release. Human mercy involved providing comprehensive education about the economic and social impacts of piracy, followed by intensive counseling and career redirection. What happened to them? Dex asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know the answer. They became some of the galaxy's most effective advocates for interstellar trade law and maritime safety protocols. Former syndicate leaders now operate legitimate shipping companies and serve as expert witnesses in anti-piracy prosecutions. The casual way she discussed complete personality reconstruction made Dex question his understanding of human psychology. "Dr. Bright," he said carefully, "are you suggesting that human mercy involves forcibly changing enemy minds?" Student Flamewing: "I'm suggesting that human mercy involves giving enemies the opportunity to become better people than they were when they chose warfare as a lifestyle." She walked closer to the assembled students, and Dex noticed that her movement patterns suggested extensive combat training despite her innocent appearance. "The thing about human concepts of mercy is that we don't believe temporary cessation of hostilities serves anyone's long-term interests. If someone has demonstrated willingness to use violence against innocent people, releasing them to repeat that behavior isn't merciful to their future victims." "But surely," Student Goldfall protested, "forced personality modification violates principles of individual autonomy?" Dr. Bright's smile was gentle and absolutely terrifying. "Student Goldfall, that's an excellent question. Do you believe that individuals have the right to choose careers that involve harming innocent people?" "Well, no, but then you already accept limitations on individual autonomy based on social impact. Humans simply extend that principle to its logical conclusion." She gestured to the rehabilitation statistics floating around them. "Human mercy operates on the assumption that everyone deserves the opportunity to become someone they can be proud of being. We don't leave people trapped in cycles of violence and victimization." "What about enemies who refuse rehabilitation?" Professor Lightfall asked. "Professor, that's like asking what happens to students who refuse education. Human rehabilitation programs are designed to help people understand why their previous choices weren't serving their own best interests. And if they still refuse?" "Professor, humans are remarkably patient and creative when it comes to educational methodology. We've never encountered anyone who couldn't eventually understand the practical benefits of choosing cooperation over conflict." The phrase, "remarkably patient and creative," carried implications that made Dex's survival instincts produce increasingly urgent warnings. "Dr. Bright," he said, are you suggesting that human rehabilitation is coercive?" Student Flamewing: "Human rehabilitation is comprehensive. We address the underlying psychological, social, and economic factors that led to poor decision-making. Most people find the process quite liberating once they understand how much better their lives become." She began gathering her materials, apparently considering the discussion complete. "The thing about human mercy is that it's designed to be permanent. We don't show temporary compassion followed by inevitable future conflict. We show lasting compassion that prevents the need for future conflict." "By eliminating enemy opposition entirely," Student Stormsea observed. "By converting enemy opposition into allied cooperation," she corrected. "Much more efficient and considerably more humane than the traditional cycle of warfare, defeat, release, and renewed conflict." As she packed up her knitting supplies, Dr. Bright looked around the classroom at the various alien students who were processing this new understanding of human approaches to conflict resolution. "Students, your discussion of mercy as a strategic principle was academically sophisticated, but practically naive. Real mercy requires permanent solutions to the problems that cause warfare in the first place. And human solutions involve changing enemy minds until they agree with human perspectives?" Professor Lightfall asked. "Professor, human solutions involve helping everyone understand that cooperation serves their interests better than conflict. Most beings find this realization quite obvious once it's properly explained." She headed toward the exit, pausing only to add, "Of course, some explanations require more time and attention than others, but humans are very thorough teachers." The door closed behind her, leaving the classroom in stunned silence as students contemplated the uncomfortable realization that human mercy might be more terrifying than human wrath. Because human wrath ended quickly, human mercy lasted forever. 2 days after Dr. Bright's unsettling lecture, student Dex Flamewing received news that would transform his understanding of human mercy from theoretical horror to practical nightmare. The alert came through official academy channels. A crisis had developed in the Outer Rim sectors that required immediate academic observation for research purposes. Students, Professor Lightfall announced to his advanced military ethics class, we've been granted unprecedented access to observe a developing military situation. The Crimson Dominion has initiated aggressive expansion against 3 independent colonies, and human forces have been requested to intervene. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. After Dr. Bright's revelations about human approaches to mercy, they would now witness these methods in actual practice. Dr. Bright, Lightfall continued, has arranged for our class to monitor the situation through secure academic channels. She assures me this will provide valuable insights into practical applications of the concepts we've been discussing. Dex felt his survival instincts producing warning signals as Dr. Bright entered the classroom, still carrying her knitting but now accompanied by sophisticated communication equipment that suggested this wouldn't be merely theoretical observation. "Students," she announced cheerfully, "you'll be watching Captain Lily Vale and her diplomatic team handle a situation involving approximately 40,000 Dominion troops who have occupied civilian population centers." She activated holographic displays that showed real-time intelligence feeds from the crisis zone. The Crimson Dominion forces had seized 3 agricultural worlds, enslaved the local populations, and were systematically stripping the planets of resources. According to your previous definitions, Dr. Bright continued, merciful response would involve defeating Dominion forces and then providing humane detention until post-conflict prisoner exchange. That seems reasonable, student Vex Stormsea observed cautiously. It would be reasonable, Dr. Bright agreed, if humans considered this a traditional military engagement. But humans don't view civilian enslavement as legitimate warfare. We view it as a career guidance emergency. The displays showed Captain Vale's ship, the UES Compassion, approaching the occupied systems with what appeared to be a minimal military escort. More concerning was the accompanying fleet of vessels labeled as educational support ships and rehabilitation transports. "Captain Vale," came the communication through the classroom speakers. "This is Dominion Marshal Ironscale. You will withdraw immediately or face the consequences of engaging superior forces." "Marshal Ironscale?" Captain Vale replied, her voice carrying the kind of patience typically reserved for dealing with difficult children. "I understand you've been experiencing some challenges with decision-making lately. We're here to help." The casual way she discussed military intervention as therapy made Dex's philosophical processors generate error messages. "You dare mock the Dominion military?" "Marshal, I'm not mocking anyone. I'm offering comprehensive assistance with the life problems that led to your current career difficulties." "What are you talking about?" "Marshal Ironscale, enslaving civilian populations suggests some underlying issues with empathy development and conflict resolution skills. Human Social Services has developed very effective programs for addressing these kinds of challenges." Student Goldfall's crystalline form was refracting light in patterns that indicated extreme agitation. "Dr. Bright, is Captain Vale seriously offering therapy to hostile military forces?" Student Goldfall, "Captain Vale is offering something much more comprehensive than therapy. She's offering complete life restructuring for anyone interested in becoming a better person than they currently are." The communication continued as Marshal Ironscale rejected human offers of assistance with increasing hostility, while Captain Vale maintained the tone of a social worker dealing with troubled individuals rather than enemy combatants. "Marshal," Captain Vale said eventually, "I appreciate that you're not ready to accept help voluntarily. Don't worry. Human Social Services has extensive experience with involuntary clients who initially resist positive life changes." "Involuntary clients?" Professor Lightfall asked with growing alarm. "Professor, that's the technical term for individuals whose behavior has become so problematic that intervention is required for public safety," Dr. Bright explained matter-of-factly. What followed was unlike anything Dex had studied in military theory. Instead of conventional assault, human forces began implementing what could only be described as social work on an interstellar scale. Phase 1. Community outreach, Captain Vale announced as her ships deployed to the occupied worlds. "We'll be establishing counseling centers, educational facilities, and career guidance offices on each planet." Dex watched in fascination and horror as human diplomatic teams landed on all 3 worlds simultaneously, not to engage Dominion forces, but to begin offering services to both occupiers and occupied populations. We're providing free psychological evaluation, substance abuse counseling, financial planning assistance, and job training opportunities, one team leader reported. Anyone interested in exploring alternatives to their current lifestyle is welcome to attend our workshops. What about the Dominion troops who don't want counseling? Student Storm C asked. That's Phase 2, Dr. Bright replied with her terrifying grandmotherly smile. Phase 2 began when it became clear that most Dominion forces were uninterested in voluntary participation in human social programs. Captain Vale's response was to implement what she called environmental modifications for behavioral improvement. We're adjusting local conditions to encourage better decision-making, she explained as human ships began systematically disrupting Dominion supply lines, communication networks, and command structures. This isn't military action, Dr. Bright clarified for her stunned academic audience. This is creating circumstances that help people recognize when their current choices aren't serving their best interests. Dex watched as human forces implemented precision operations that left Dominion troops stranded without supplies, isolated from leadership, and increasingly desperate while remaining completely unharmed. The beauty of environmental modification, Dr. Bright continued, is that it allows people to reach their own conclusions about lifestyle changes, rather than having decisions imposed on them. Within days, individual Dominion soldiers began approaching human counseling centers, initially seeking food and medical supplies, but gradually engaging with the comprehensive life improvement programs being offered. We're seeing excellent response rates, reported Dr. Jenny Reed, the human chief of social services. Dominion personnel are showing genuine interest in career alternatives once they understand the long-term prospects for their current profession. What are the long-term prospects? Dex asked, though he suspected the answer would be disturbing. Slavery-based economies aren't sustainable, Dr. Bright explained. The Dominion's expansion model requires constant conquest to maintain resource flow. Eventually, they run out of conquerable targets and face economic collapse. The displays showed detailed economic analysis, demonstrating how the Dominion's entire social structure was built on unsustainable exploitation that would inevitably lead to civilizational failure. Our social workers help people understand these realities and explore more stable career options in legitimate sectors of the galactic economy. What about personnel who refuse career counseling? Professor Lightfall asked. Professor, that brings us to Phase 3. Intensive personal development. Phase 3 began when Marshal Ironscale and approximately 3,000 Dominion hardliners rejected all offers of voluntary lifestyle modification. Captain Vale's response was to implement what humans euphemistically called individualized attention programs. Marshal Ironscale and his remaining supporters have been enrolled in our advanced personal growth curriculum, Captain Vale announced. The program is designed to address the deep-seated psychological issues that prevent individuals from making healthy life choices. What followed was systematic psychological intervention that made Dex question his understanding of the line between education and warfare. Dominion leadership found themselves experiencing carefully controlled scenarios designed to help them understand the emotional impact of their actions from their victims' perspectives. We're providing immersive learning experiences, Dr. Reed explained as the programs continued. Participants experience simulated versions of the trauma they've inflicted on others, but with human medical technology ensuring they remain safe throughout the educational process. How long does this education continue? Student Goldfall asked with obvious distress. Until graduation, Dr. Bright replied. Some students require more intensive instruction than others. The advanced personal development programs combined psychological reconditioning with what humans called empathy enhancement therapy and moral reasoning development exercises. Participants experienced systematic education about the consequences of their choices while receiving comprehensive counseling about healthier ways to meet their needs. The remarkable thing, Dr. Reed reported after 2 weeks, is how quickly most participants begin to understand why their previous choices weren't serving their own best interests, let alone society's. Marshal Ironscale's transformation was particularly dramatic. The being who had initially threatened human forces with military destruction was now actively participating in victim impact counseling and expressing genuine remorse for his role in civilian enslavement. I never understood, his recorded statement played through the classroom speakers, how my actions affected real people. The education programs helped me recognize that I was trapped in destructive patterns that were harming everyone, including myself. That's not the same person who threatened Captain Vale, Student Stormsea observed. Student Stormsea, that's exactly the point, Dr. Bright replied. It is the same person, but now he's a version of himself that he can be proud of being. The situation concluded with all surviving Dominion forces voluntarily enrolling in long-term rehabilitation programs. The 3 occupied worlds were liberated, but more significantly, 40,000 former enemy combatants had become advocates for peaceful conflict resolution and victims' rights. Class dismissed, Professor Lightfall said weakly, as the final reports came in. I need time to process what we've witnessed. As students filed out, discussing the implications of human social work masquerading as warfare, Dex approached Dr. Bright with questions that went to the heart of human morality. Dr. Bright, he said carefully, what we observed wasn't military mercy. It was systematic personality reconstruction on a massive scale. Student Flamewing, what we observed was 40,000 people getting the chance to become better versions of themselves. Most of them are quite grateful for the opportunity. But you forced them to change. Student Flamewing, we forced them to understand the consequences of their choices. The decision to change was ultimately theirs. She gathered her knitting supplies while Dex processed the philosophical implications of her statement. Dr. Bright, human mercy doesn't preserve enemy identity. It transforms it completely. Student Flamewing, human mercy preserves what's valuable in every person while helping them abandon what's destructive. We believe everyone deserves the chance to become someone they can respect. And if they refuse that chance? Student Flamewing, humans are remarkably patient teachers. We've never met anyone who couldn't eventually understand why cooperation serves their interests better than conflict. As she headed toward the exit, Dr. Bright paused to offer one final observation. The thing about human approaches to mercy is that they're designed to be permanent solutions. We don't show temporary compassion followed by recurring problems. We show lasting compassion that eliminates the root causes of future suffering. By eliminating the people who cause suffering? By helping the people who cause suffering become people who prevent suffering instead. The door closed behind her, leaving Dex alone with the realization that human mercy was indeed more terrifying than human wrath. Because human wrath ended when enemies were defeated. Human mercy ended when enemies no longer existed as enemies. And humans, it appeared, were very thorough about ensuring their mercy was properly applied. 6 months after the Crimson Dominion incident, Dex found himself researching the long-term effects of human mercy across the galaxy. What he discovered disturbed him more than even Dr. Bright's initial revelations. The pattern wasn't isolated to military conflicts. Humans had been implementing their comprehensive rehabilitation philosophy across every sector of galactic society. The Stellar Trade Commission had recently appointed former pirate Captain Rex Shadowbane as their new Director of Maritime Security. Captain Shadowbane's biography noted his successful career transition following intensive personal development counseling, and his current passion for protecting innocent merchants from the predatory practices he once employed. The Galactic Medical Association had welcomed Dr. Vash Plagueweaver, formerly the Toxic Syndicate's chief biochemist, as their new head of pandemic prevention. Dr. Plagueweaver's research now focused on antidotes for the very bioweapons he had once created, driven by what his interviews described as a profound understanding of suffering gained through empathy enhancement therapy. Most unsettling of all was the announcement from the Interstellar Court of Justice that Judge Tyrant Bloodfist, once the military dictator of the Omega Sector, had been confirmed as their new Chief Justice for War Crimes Tribunals. Judge Bloodfist's confirmation hearing had been notable for his passionate advocacy for victim rights and his detailed understanding of trauma psychology, skills he attributed to comprehensive educational experiences that helped me recognize my responsibility to those I had harmed. The pattern was clear and disturbing. Every major position of authority in galactic society was gradually being filled by former enemies of peace who had undergone human rehabilitation. They weren't just integrated into society. They had become its most effective guardians, precisely because they understood the mindset of those who would threaten it. Dex realized that Dr. Bright's classroom lecture hadn't been about military strategy at all. It had been about social engineering on a galactic scale. Humans weren't just winning individual conflicts. They were systematically converting their enemies into the most dedicated enforcers of human values throughout civilized space. The most chilling part was that none of these rehabilitated individuals seemed unhappy about their transformations. In interviews, they consistently expressed gratitude for their educational experiences and genuine enthusiasm for their new roles, protecting the very societies they had once threatened. 3 months later, Dex received an invitation that confirmed everything he'd learned about human approaches to conflict resolution. The Rehabilitation Academy on New Geneva was offering advanced degrees in compassionate intervention methodology, and they were specifically recruiting non-human students to help spread these techniques throughout the galaxy. The letter was signed by Marshal Ironscale, now serving as Dean of Student Affairs at the Academy's Department of Career Transition Counseling. But it wasn't the invitation itself that made Dex's scales prickle with unease. It was the accompanying testimonials from recent graduates. Professor Vel Swordtail, formerly a draconian warlord known for his brutal suppression of mining colonies, now taught ethical resource management at the Academy. His statement was enthusiastic. The compassionate intervention methodology helped me understand that my previous approaches to leadership were fundamentally flawed. I now feel privileged to help other beings discover better ways to channel their natural authority instincts. Even more disturbing was the testimonial from Commander Zara Fleetburner, once the terror of the Outer Systems shipping lanes. She now served as director of the Human Social Services Mobile Response Division, specializing in proactive intervention with at-risk military populations. Her words carried the same unsettling combination of genuine enthusiasm and complete personality transformation that Dex had witnessed in Marshal Ironscale. "What I thought was strength was actually weakness," her statement read. "What I thought was freedom was actually slavery to destructive patterns. The humans didn't just change my career, they gave me back my soul." The testimonials went on for pages, each one a testament to the thoroughness of human mercy. Former dictators, pirates, terrorists, and warlords, all expressing heartfelt gratitude for their educational experiences and eager to help others through the same transformation process. What made it truly terrifying was that none of it seemed forced. The emotional authenticity was unmistakable. These beings genuinely believed they were better people now, and by all measurable standards, they were. They had become productive members of society, dedicated to preventing the very conflicts they had once created. The humans, Dex realized, hadn't just conquered their enemies. They had convinced their enemies to conquer themselves. Dex stared at the invitation for a long time before carefully filing it away. He wasn't ready to experience human mercy personally, but he now understood why the galaxy was becoming a more peaceful place, one rehabilitated enemy at a time. Human mercy, it turned out, was the most effective form of conquest ever devised. Because the conquered never even realized they'd been conquered. They just became better people.